So early in my career, I was a young patent attorney. So I was the only woman associate at the law firm. I was the only attorney who was a person of color. And being the only just made me feel and start to doubt myself in ways that I had never, ever experienced in education, all my years of education. So that didn't daunt me necessarily. My dream was to become a rainmaker. I wanted to be one of the powerful shareholders at the top. I wanted to be a rainmaker. So I did what rainmakers do. I networked. And I went into a luncheon one day, and I sat down at a table with some men, because there were only tables of men. And nobody introduced themselves. Nobody said hello to me. And I felt invisible. And then I started to get annoyed. I literally was the minority in the room. And I think they could have done a little more to make me feel welcome. And secondly, it's just polite manners to say hello, right? These professional men had forgotten all of the manners that their mothers taught them, and their mothers would be mortified. So I thought, you're gonna ignore me. Well, I don't think so. So I got up, I walked around, and I introduced myself to every person at the table. And I made them see me, and I made sure they knew I was a patent attorney and a professional who belonged in that room. So being one of the only is really hard. It takes a lot of courage. The room didn't change. They didn't become more friendly. But what shifted is I felt more brave. I felt a little rebellious, right? Those early career experiences are why I do the work I do today, because I don't want anyone else to feel this way. And I realized if I want things to change, I have to be part of that change. So I think a lot of you may be thinking of yourself in that networking room, some version of it for yourself, wondering if you belong. You might be questioning if you're doing the right thing and unsure what direction to go. And when the world is telling everybody to pivot left, right, forward, slow down, no speed up, right? It can be really challenging, and I want to offer you today a different way to think about pivoting entirely. So this is a gyroscope. You probably played with one as a toy. And I'm gonna I have a microphone over here. And if, just like a gyroscope, if I just let it go, gravity pulls it down just like anything else. It's literally just a wheel and an axis, that's all it is, right? But watch what happens. Okay, so now let me try to tip it over. It feels the force of my finger, but the momentum that it has to keep spinning, that's overcoming gravity. I'm just gonna leave it right here. All right, so when the gyroscope spins, it generates what's called angular momentum. It's a property of rotation that makes it resist being tipped. The stronger that momentum, the more stable it becomes against outside forces. And that axis, that rod in the middle, it's always spinning around the center. So you'll notice on the stand, it's not moving at the bottom, but the top is making a circle, but it's never untethered to its axis, okay? So when it slows down, and it will eventually, it will lose its spin. The moment gravity overcomes the internal momentum, gravity wins. And what will slow it down is just the cumulative drag of friction and air resistance. So I want you to think about your business right now. Think about everything pulling you. AI uncertainty, economic pressure, competitors who seem to be crushing it, the moments if you're wondering if you're making the right call and headed in the right direction. Now, none of these things alone is enough to knock you over, but friction compounds. And if it wears down what's spinning at your center, your sense of who you are, what you stand for, why you started your business, that's when the outside forces win. not because they were stronger than you, but because the friction slowed you down until you didn't have enough momentum to keep spinning. So when everything is around you is telling you to pivot, left, right, forward, up, down, I want to suggest a different direction. Pivot center. So while you think about that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the gyroscope. Okay. And it's sort of still spinning, see that? It's kind of cool. All right, keep doing your thing. So in reality, the axis is just an imaginary line. But for today, I want you to think of yourself as the rod in the middle, that axis. The rest of the gyroscope is circling around that axis. That's all the forces around you. You can't control your industry. You can't control the market. But how stable the center is determines whether the forces knock you off your course or not. Pivot center doesn't mean stand still. So remember, the top of the gyroscope does move. It's tracing a circle. It means that every direction that you move, you stay tethered to your axis. Now, your movement can be bold, it can be significant, but when you pivot center, it's never untethered from who you are. So the Earth works this way too. It spins on its own axis while outside forces pull at it constantly. The sun, the moon, everything in its orbit. And over thousands of years, the axis slowly traces a complete circle in space. And right now, the Earth's axis is pointing toward the North Star. And the way you pivot center towards your axis is by trusting yourself. Trust is not a feeling that you wait for. It's not the same thing as confidence. Trust is a daily choice to keep returning to your center. That's what pivot center means. So today, I want to illustrate 3 ways to pivot center. 3 ways to keep that axis spinning when the world is doing everything it can to slow you down. Build momentum from your strengths, lead from your values, and navigate complexity together. Okay, first, build momentum from your strengths. In the gyroscope, spin creates angular momentum. That is what keeps the axis upright. And I want to start here because this is where most of us have work to do. Not learning new skills, but trusting the ones that we already have. Now, I've been in rooms, like I told you, my whole career, where I'm usually one of the only women or person of color in the room. Not today, thankfully. Welcome. So nice. And feeling isolated and unsupported, I decided to do something about it. Not because I had a business plan or saw a marketing opportunity, but because I didn't want other women to have the same experience. What I built was Women Tech Council. I call it my first successful startup. And a small group of us women leaders decided we were going to change the narrative for women in tech in Utah. For 13 years as co-founder, I co-steered all of the programs and events that we built. And Utah's culture was so different back then, and it's so different now, 25 years later. And I like to think that Women Tech Council had a little something to do with that. For the first few years, I saw this as my passion project. It turned out to be an incredible space to build skills and test them. I learned public speaking. I learned how to build strategy and drive teams. I became an expert networker across industries and economic sectors. I discovered I'm creative, and I didn't know lawyers were allowed to do that. So those skills made me ready to jump from professional services into the business world. Now, none of that happens if I fit in at the law firm. None of that happens if it was easy for me to fit in that room. The same principle showed up 7 years ago. I had the opportunity to give a TEDxSaltLakeCity talk on international adoption. My idea was simple, but rarely talked about. When a child is adopted internationally, their entire birth family disappears from their life. In that child's mind, it's the same as if their entire family has died, and no one allows them to grieve. The parent narrative is usually the only one story that we hear. It's usually the only one anyone knows, and it's not because the parents are doing something wrong. That's just the story that the world defaults to. And it's what the community repeats. It's what friends and family celebrate. So when I was adopted, parents were told that assimilation was best. Just fully immerse the child in the new family and culture. And they thought they were doing something good to ease my transition. So there have been over 500,000 Korean children adopted worldwide. I struggled with my talk at one point because I thought, well, any adoptee could give this talk. What am I bringing that's special? I'm not a researcher. I don't have a PhD. I'm just an adoptee. And my coaches stopped me. They said, a TED Talk is not about your credentials. It's about an idea and the right person to deliver that idea. Yours is the only lens through which this idea can be told. And they were right. A researcher could present the data, but they could not make a room full of strangers feel what it's like for a 3-year-old to lose her entire family, all of her memories, her culture, her language, and her entire identity, and to feel dismissed her entire life by the only narrative that people around her know. Now, my story of finding my Korean birth family was quite miraculous, and the TED organization did feature the talk, and it has been seen over millions of views. The Gen Z in the room were probably like, really? Only 2 million? Like, maybe you should put your talk on TikTok. Both of these stories share the same root. When I thought I was disadvantaged, it turned out to be the very thing that I needed to shift people's thinking. That women in business are an asset, not a deficit. That international adoption is just as much about grief and loss as it is about forming family. Our unique experiences give us the lens to see problems differently, and this is one of your strengths that spins that axis to create angular momentum to keep your axis upright. Small business owners, and I know this personally, do not have a perfect roadmap. You can't afford to stop learning. Every time the landscape shifts, the internet rewrites your industry, a pandemic shuts your doors, AI comes overnight and completely shifts the trajectory of everything. You had to figure it out. Your problem-solving skills have been sharpened by these events. And you're here today with that sharpened learning skill, recognizing that the world is accelerating faster than any of us can track. And your ability to learn is one of your strongest strengths that you have. And because your resources are limited, you test, you measure, you adjust. And that kind of discipline, staying focused on what moves the needle, is not a strength you learn in business school. You've earned it by not having enough margin to be sloppy. So those are not small things, those are your strengths that create the spin that generates momentum. All right, so now lead with your values. Values are not a soft concept. They are the axis itself, the fixed rod that everything spins around. Let me share with you how I was reminded of that recently. But first, I'm going to give you some context because that matters for what comes next. For over 25 years, I've worked on inclusion in Utah, inside companies, as an industry advocate, building Women Tech Council, and for the past 9 years as a business consultant. I'd seen inclusion done in all its forms. And as an executive, I understood the pressures that leaders face. Leaders do care about inclusion, but they're also trying to keep their axis spinning with all of the forces around them. So I turned traditional models upside down, and I created methods that genuinely work for executives and spoke to their values. I loved working with my clients who did this journey with me. And then the ground shifted. Last January, a Utah bill this bill was passed that removed all diversity, equity, and inclusion offices and identity-based programs from public spaces, higher education, government, K-12 education. Now, most people didn't even realize this was happening, but I read the bill language. And because I had been in this work for so long, I understood the ripple effects that were going to happen. 3 days after the bill passed, I was already scheduled to give a lecture at UVU called Facing the Storm, Ethical Leadership in an Era of DEI Controversy. How ironic. I had plenty of people telling me to pivot. AI had become a tsunami, and a lot of people moved in that direction. But I dragged my heels. I kept thinking, what would it say if I walk away? I'd mastered how to get executives engaged in inclusion. Now, this has been a riddle that has been plaguing this work for decades. So I stayed stuck in that dilemma, and it had a real cost. And then a friend showed up. She had recently become a Vistage chair in Utah. So the Vistage Chair Network, it's a worldwide peer network for CEOs and business leaders. And she told me I should become a speaker in that network. So something you need to know about the Vistage Network. When you're a speaker, they rate you at every single session. Okay, so at the end of a session, they scan this QR code, and they're rating you literally while you're standing in the room. And all the Vistage chairs around the world have access to your ratings. So naturally, I said yes, and I got to work. My friend kept checking in with tips and with encouragement. She kept sparking this belief in me that I had something to offer these CEOs. Through revisions and honest feedback from many Vistage groups across the nation, I built a strategy workshop that any business leader could get behind, one that practices everything I believe about inclusion. I'm also happy to report that the Vistage Network, they're some of the most welcoming and open-minded leaders that I know. So now you might not think that building a strategy workshop is a big deal, but the work brought life back into me, and I never had to abandon my values of high quality, inclusion, and business impact to get there. And that work also inspired me to start a sister company and to write a book. So that is what values and strategy actually looks like. It's not clean, it's not pretty. Nobody applauds you when you're in the middle of it. But if you can stay rooted in what you actually believe, even when the ground is shifting around you, even when your own guilt is telling you that you should be pivoting too, your values can guide your strategy. Okay, so last we're going to talk about navigating complexity together. So a single gyroscope, we just saw, is pretty cool, it's remarkable. When it's spinning in its center, it stands upright. But one spinning axis is never enough, and here's why. A single gyroscope gives only partial orientation, but the world doesn't come at you from one direction. It comes at you from every direction at once. Uncertainty about AI, shifting policies, economic pressure, our geopolitical upheaval, your own doubt, your own exhaustion, right? And the list goes on. So running a business is complex. It's not complicated. There's a difference. Complicated means that there's a lot of moving parts, and someone has to figure it out, and they do, and there's a map. Complex means that the variables keep changing, and no map exists because nobody's navigated this terrain before. So that's why businesses are exactly the type of area that need more than one axis. So in space, engineers solve this problem by mounting 3 gyroscopes together in what's called an inertial measurement unit. Each gyroscope is oriented at right angles to each other, one for each dimension of movement, X, Y, and Z. And together, they can cover every direction in space. So with inertial units, the Hubble telescope is incredibly precise and stable, and it can see a wide range of space. The Hubble was actually launched with 6 gyroscopes because they knew the complexity that Hubble was going to experience it demanded it, traveling 17,000 miles per hour around Earth while locking onto targets billions of light years away. So why 6 gyroscopes? They provided both precision and redundancy. And that foresight ended up adding years to their operation. So building Women Tech Council was an example of holding steady against multiple forces: societal norms, biases, educational pathways, company cultures. We gathered many people whose axes spun at different angles: tech founders, business leaders, venture capital, education, government, and women themselves. A 360-degree view. And during my time, we built 7 career pathway programs from high school all the way to the boardroom. And many of these programs actually addressed multiple forces at once because we had that 360-degree view. No one person or group could have done that. And 20 years later, Women Tech Council is still advancing its mission. So over the years, Hubble telescope lost its gyroscopes one by one. And it just happened through normal wear and friction. And eventually it got down to one gyroscope. The telescope didn't stop working, it just became a diminished version of itself, less precise, less stable, and seeing less of the sky, because it was trying to navigate extraordinary complexity with one axis alone. So there are moments in all of our lives when we see less of the sky and we feel overwhelmed. We're still spinning and functioning, but unlike Hubble, we're not limited to 6 gyroscopes. We can choose to have so many more around us. So building Women Tech Council alongside these leaders who were growing their own businesses, creating products, pushing their industries forward while pulling other women with them. This brought my career possibilities into focus. I thought I had my path set. Practice law, make partner, become a rainmaker. My axis of orientation was one-dimensional. Their axes were spinning at different angles, and I was able to see new dimensions of possibility. So you all came here for a business reason, a challenge you're trying to solve, a question that you can't answer, or just a feeling that you needed something to help you run your business. So those people you just talked to, I mean, the folks in this room, we are all navigating this together. And those people you talk to can see your situation from an angle that you can't see. So the answer might be in this room, but the answer might be also with other people that you engage in your work. This is about recognizing that what we are navigating has exceeded what any one single axis can handle. And we need other axes beside us, people spinning from their own angles and their own centers, people who build other people up where they are weak. Okay, so one last little physics question. This is different than the Hubble telescope, those inertial units I told you about. This is transferring energy. Did you know that when gyroscopes are mounted together in a shared structure, energy can be transferred through the structure connecting them? In this coupled gyroscope system, one axis with a strong spin can redirect momentum through the shared structure and help restore the other gyroscope's spin. The energy through the connection between them. That is what my friend did. She was spinning strong from her own center, and through our connection, she stabilized my orientation, and she transferred energy to increase my spin. She didn't lose anything by it. And sometimes, like my friend who showed up, it only takes one other person, someone who tells you the truth, someone who pushes you when you need pushing, and someone who celebrates you when you break through. So don't try to do it alone. Build your community before you need it. Build an entire system of gyroscopes to provide stability and energy. Charge up someone else's spin and let someone do that for you. So that's the third way to pivot, center. We are never meant to navigate this alone. All right, let's see if I can do this one more time, because this was the most stressful part of my talk, I'm just gonna say. All right, let's see if we can do this again. All right, are you up? All right, so your strengths generate the spin to create momentum that keeps the axis upright. Your values are the axis, that rod around which everything spins. And your humility allows the proximity to people who are spinning at different angles and different energies as yours. So back to trust, because trust is what makes all of these possible. And it's also the hardest part. Trust is not that feeling that arrives when conditions are right. It's not something you wait for until you feel certain, or the market stabilizes, or someone validates you. Trusting your strengths means acting on what you know, even if you haven't been acknowledged. It means introducing yourself to those people without an invitation. It means submitting that TED Talk even though you think 500,000 other people could do it better. Trusting your values means staying on your axis when every external force is telling you to veer, and it's hard, and it can be lonely. It's the daily decision to keep spinning from your center even when your momentum is at its lowest. Trusting your people means being seen when you're running out of momentum, and that is the hardest trust of all, because people expect business leaders to show up and lead. It is that moment that you most need your inertial unit around you and to be emotionally connected so their energy can help you recover your spin. Trust is the daily choice to pivot center to your strengths, your values, your people, so that your spin stays strong and gravity never wins. So that is how we all navigate this age of acceleration. Thank you.